Good morning, everybody. Reverend Mark Gilbert here, and welcome to our Saturday Science of Mind conversation series. It's great to be back with you again. It's probably been a month or two since I've been with you, and I'm excited about the topic and the conversation that we're going to be going through today. As we've been doing all year long, we've been exploring the works of Ernest Holmes and the science of mind, and for the early part of the year, we were going through the Science of Mind textbook until around the middle of August or so. And then we switched over and have been doing a number of other Science of Mind related topics. This week, what we're going to be doing is again tapping into the Science of Mind archives. And we're going to be looking at a particular piece of work that Ernest Holmes wrote back in the late 1930s and early 1940s. It's called The God Within You. The God Within You. I'll be telling you a little bit more about that in just a second. That's what we're going to be doing. And just a little bit of background about that. I've been blessed lately to be serving on the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, and not only serving on their board, but doing a lot of work with them behind the scenes in terms of reviewing and inventorying a lot of the unpublished work of Ernest Holmes and so forth, and also categorizing what all we have and what we don't have on the website for the archives. And so what we're going to be doing is, and what I did actually during all of this time was to look at things that we could put out on the Science of Mind Archive website. And one of the things we put out this past week was a document called The God Within You. And I thought this would be a great topic for us to cover this Saturday morning. Now, I know that most of you have probably not read this, and so you can see the link on the screen right now where you can go and get it. But if you're watching this live, you can probably just follow along and then go and follow that link later and pick up a copy of it. One of the beautiful things about the archives is the material that's put out there is available if you are a subscriber or a member of the archives, which I encourage you to become. Then you can pick up and download up to 20 things a month, which is very cost effective. I think you can join as a subscriber for as little as $10 a month. And, so 20 items, that's 50 cents an item, which is a great deal. If you can also buy stuff a la carte, and there are different prices based on the length of the document. And so anyway, if you go to that link there, or the easiest way, if you want, is just go to the scienceofmindarchives.com and then do a search on The God Within You, The God Within You, and it will bring up the document that is the one that we're going to be discussing. Now, the interesting thing about this particular document is it's based on a 12-part series that Ernest Holmes did, and he wrote these and published them over a period of a number of months. He started in the issue in June of 1939, and it ran through May of 1940 with one article every month around the topic of the God within you. And the interesting thing to me is that Ernest wrote a lot of content. I mean, one of the things I've discovered in working for the archives is that, he produced a magazine article, one or more every month from the late 20s up until he passed in 1960. But even after his passing, there were articles that were coming out from them he had written ahead of time. So you look at that span of time, and although there were a few of them that were repeated, a lot of them were unique and different articles. He also was doing Sunday talks, and he was doing Sunday talks at different theaters and so forth. And so he was writing his Sunday messages. He also had a radio show for a number of years. In fact, multiple radio shows, had a short-lived TV show that they did. And all of this he wrote content for. He did phonograph records, and he taught classes. There is so much content, and Ernest was so prolific. But one of the pieces that I discovered is this one called the God Within You. And I looked around to say, well, did this ever get published somewhere as a book or in a longer format? And it might still be out there, but I've been able, as of this moment, to identify where it might have been published in some other book. A lot of his longer piece forms, where he wrote a multi-month series for the magazine, ended up getting pulled and published as books. Or sometimes he wrote a book and would turn around and serialized it in the magazine over a number of months. And so there was a lot of content back and forth between his books and the magazine articles. This particular series of The God Within You is originally started in this issue of the Science of Mind magazine. And I love this copy. I love how it says Science of Mind helps you find yourself. And you'll notice there's a list of articles on the cover. Ernest Holmes has one in there. Life belongs to the one who takes it. So that was his key article for that particular month, not the one that I'm covering with you. And then the then current editor of the magazine had an article in there. That's Maud Latham. Frederick Bell's famous New Thought minister and teacher back in the early part of the 20th century. And he had an article in the magazine as well. So that's what the cover looked like. But let's look at the table of contents. A table of contents from this particular issue of June 1939 you can see the kinds of things that were covered in there. Reginald Armour had an article on progress in science. There you can see there down about a few inches in, The God Within You, Part 1. The life that is within you, and that's the beginning piece of the series that we're going to be discussing. And again, the document that you can go off to the archives and get is it's one that it's all 12 parts in one document. So you're going to get all the content that we're talking about this morning is going to be in that one document, and it's a key piece. In fact, one of the things I want to mention about that particular series of articles is that it changes voice. It changes voice in midstream. It brings about a change in how Ernest is for the first 7 parts of this article. He is teaching us basic science of mind concepts under this idea of the God within you. And then around the 7th part of it, he switches voices and becomes very mystical. In fact, I'll speak more about that as we go on this morning. But the interesting thing is that in his voice switch, it really becomes so deep and so mystical that I felt the need to actually write a piece about this on my website. So what I did, and for those of you who know me, I have a consciousbridge.com website. And one of the blogs that I did this week is based on the article that we're covering, and where I go through and pull a lot of the mystical type quotes from Ernest Holmes and put it in there. So if you're watching this live, one of the things that I would mention is that if you just go to the consciousbridge page and then come down, that blog will be on the home page. If you're watching the video of this after the fact, then you can go and search in the search bar for the God within you, or the mystical Ernest Holmes, and then you'll find that particular blog and my reflections upon it. But I'll come back and talk more about that in a few minutes. One of the other key things I want to talk about before we get into the content itself is just to remind you, these are conversation programs, and I do want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from you. If you drop a comment in, if you're watching this live, if nothing else, drop your name and where you're from in the comment field. And I know that we've got a couple of people who are already watching. I'm going to try to watch that as well as I can and put it in the feed. Thank you, Wayne from Calgary. It's great to have you again. I know you're one of our frequent listeners and watchers, and it's always great to have you here. Appreciate that. We've got Roy coming in from Layton, Utah. Thank you, Roy. And if anybody else is out there watching, just drop in the comment field your name and where you are, and we'll try to bring you in. And then I'd also encourage you, as I go through this material and as I'm talking, if something comes up for you, be sure as the thing is streaming across the bottom, ask a question. I want to hear from you, and if there's a good question that we can bring forth into the conversation and help us take us in some direction that serves your needs, be sure to do that. So that's where we're going for the next few minutes. One of the things that I do want to mention too is that this particular article, like I said, the first 7 parts of it have this concept of teaching the science of mind. And so let's look at just the topics in the first 7 articles from this series. Ernest talks about the life that is within you, the mind that is within you, the law that is within you, the power that is within you, the friend that is within you, the healing presence that is within you, and the pieces that is within you. He uses this this reference to remind us that anchored within us is a power and a presence and a friend and a peacefulness and a law. All of these concepts are anchored within us in this moment. And so he starts off when talking about the life that is within you is to recognize that the life within you is God. The life that is within you is God. And he says, if the life within you is God, then whatever is true of God is true of that life, since your life and the life of God are not two, but one. Now that's different from what we mostly think about. Let's think about how we walk around each day with this sort of sense of, here I am, I'm Mark, you're who you are, Wayne, Roy, and others. And we have this sense of this beingness that is separate and apart from the rest of the world. And we don't think of God as being inside us. We don't think of God as being that aspect that gives life to our form and our essence. And so these first 7 lessons are really earnest reminding us to shift that focus, And what we're trying to shift from is the world of form and all the stuff out there that's constantly reminding us that it's separate and apart from us. That's our daily message that we get inundated with. And all of our life tends to want to reinforce that concept that all of that other stuff out there is different and separate and apart. And what Ernest starts off with is the life in you is God. And if the life within you is God, then whatever is true of God is true of that life, since your life and the life of God are not two, but one. Then he goes on from there to say, to give you some characteristics of what he means by that. He wants to remind you of the concepts of your life as you shift this focus. He's trying to take you from being outside yourself to being inside yourself. Okay. Now, just to reflect on this for half a moment, I see that Wayne is asking, how do we practice oneness? How do we practice this oneness? Well, I think reading sacred readings and reading powerful spiritual readings like these works that we're going through with Ernest Holmes, that's one way of practicing oneness. But another way is to take time every day to sort of shift our focus and attention. I can give you a quick laundry list on ways to practice oneness. I think it starts, though, with an intention to feel into the oneness of your lives. Because as I was talking about a moment ago, all of us are inundated with a sensory input into these bodies and forms, and our senses are delivering to our awareness, our consciousness, that all of this stuff is separate from us. And so how do we shift our awareness to say all this stuff coming in is just God and I'm God, that I live and swim and move and have my being in the divine? And so I have to have some reminders continuously to shift my awareness, and it begins with the intention to see it and know it and to feel it. Now, there's obviously spiritual practices that we can do that are going to encourage a development of a sense of oneness. For myself personally, it's having a daily practice of meditation and reflection. It includes reading, the works of others whose works are inspirational to me to remind me of the truth of the oneness, and reading works like what we're reading through with Ernest Holmes here. These things remind me to keep that intention at the head of my awareness about the oneness of all of life, and then set practices in my life. There's a quote I really love from the Dalai Lama. He says that he looks at his schedule every day, and if his upcoming schedule is going to be very busy in the world out there, that he schedules more meditation time in the morning so that he's more anchored in the divine and the oneness of life when he's encountering all the stuff that's going to be on his schedule that day. He looks at and recognizes that he is going to be having to navigate around in this mesmerizing world of form, which is continuously bombarding us with the messages of difference and separation and apartness. And the only way we can go into our day and address our day in a way where we're feeling that oneness is to set that intention and then to practice the oneness and to start our day with a sense of oneness. And we can also stop in the middle of the day and take those moments to reflect upon seeing oneness. And sometimes I know when I can get very busy in the busyness of a particular day, I'll stop and have just a little mini break where I just go within. I'll center myself. I will breathe deeply. I'll close my eyes, or I'll reflect on something in the room, and remind myself that the aspects of life are all God. Everything I see, this video, the stuff behind me on the camera, all the comments that are coming up, the things that are, all of this is God. And I have to stay anchored in that oneness. And that's what Ernest is talking about. Um, let's see. Well, I've got, let's bring in Roy's comment here. Roy says, I'm going to have lunch with born again Christian relatives, and I want to share the God within me. Where and how do I start? That's a great question. And it gets back to, I said a minute ago that we all have this mental idea, this mental construct, or a map that we bring into our awareness about how we think the universe works. And there's evidence to support that we evolve through these mental maps. And what we have to recognize is that we live in a culture where there's essentially, I like to sort of group it. Now, everybody's mental map is unique and different. I want to say that. Those of you who are listening to these words, you've got your own view about what's real and what's not real. And, what is the reality of physical stuff versus what's the reality of mental stuff? And is there a spiritual aspect to life? And I think if you're on the spiritual path, you do recognize that there's stuff that there is aspects of the world of the material that is real. And there's aspects of the world of consciousness and spirit that are real. So there's the form and non-form. There's the material and the non-material. And I like to say that we live in two worlds simultaneously. We live in a material world and we live in a spiritual world. And as humans, we're navigating around between those two. But in the human world, in our navigation, we take our spiritual world and roll it all together, and we have a map about how life works. And so what we have are people in our current culture who believe this. They believe that God is an external being who has created laws for us to follow and is going to judge us upon our death. And I'm summarizing not only Christianity and born again Christians, but also other religions and faiths as well, that sometimes have a sense of external deity who lays down the rules for us and judges us. And there's more to that. Of course, in the concepts of born again Christians, they have a whole body of things that fall into the world map and view that they have of life. There's another group of people who say there is no God. It's all matter, it's all science, and everything in the physical world is what's real. Those of you who believe in God, whether it's God, an external God, or another aspect of it, or vision of God, that's not real. And the only thing that's real is matter and form. And as long as we can use the practices of science and rational thought to bring about life and our understanding of life, that's what's really true. And then there are people who resonate with a more broad, they sort of move through, they let go of the old version of God, the old sky God. They move through maybe a scientific, rational version of life. And then they move into a new vision of where they say, okay, it's not an either or, that we live in a world of form and matter, but we also live in a non-material world. And we know that because we're thinking. And we have aspects of our life who give messages to us that continuously are bringing us to expand to an aspect of ourselves way beyond the world of matter. So back to Roy's question, recognizing that we have, people who have different beliefs and mental maps. And your map is the God is within you. And their map is that God is an external God. Then how do you start in the conversation? Well, the one thing you do is you start by honoring where they are. They're where they are because of where they are. And it's like anything. We could take any belief any person has, political beliefs in our society today. Whatever belief you have about a political thing, somebody else has another political belief. And spiritual beliefs are the same thing. Our beliefs are fed by these mental maps we have. And the thing we have to keep in mind is that at the essence and core of every being is this divine. And they're moving through life in their own experiences, and they have come to believe what they believe about life. And we've got to honor that and not try to change them. We can explain our position of what we believe, but do it in a loving and gentle manner. So what I do with individuals who have a different belief system on spirituality is I start with, I know that, my belief about spirituality is that God's not an external being, but God is a power and a presence and an infinite force and intelligence that, embeds within everything in the world of form. And that we all have this spiritual aspect drawing through us. And you come up with your own words. What is it that you really believe about God and spirit? And just share it in a loving way. Now, that's not to say you're not going to encounter people who push back on you and say, well, because you don't believe X, Y, and Z, you're going to hell or whatever. Or in the words of a scientist who doesn't believe in hell, he may say, well, you're an ignorant fool. There could be things, put downs that you get, or things that you can have. You have the opportunity to choose how you respond to it. Are you going to choose to be angry because they said something that hurt your feelings? Or are you going to respond in a loving manner that simply says, yeah, well, this is one of those situations where we just believe differently. And what we have to know in the core of our being, that if we lived their lives and were where they were in their particular aspect, whether they were a born-again Christian or a materialistic scientist or whatever their beliefs were, that we probably would believe what they did. And if we could hold that thought within us, that opens our hearts to compassion. The main thing that we want to do in sharing our beliefs is not to judge others, not to argue with others, to let people be free to believe what they want to believe, and to also be firm in what we believe, and to have a dialogue, to have a healthy dialogue about it. One of the worst things that can happen, in my opinion, is that we allow our differences to go down this path of anger that only serves to separate us. Always come into every relationship with an idea of how can I connect us, because that's what we're teaching. If we're one with that individual who believes differently from us, then our response and actions with that person has to come from a heart of compassion, and responds to them with the recognition that we at our core being are all one. And that's what Ernest is really talking about in this particular article. Let me just jump around and give you a few other quotes. He says, there is a big difference whether or not you believe God to be within you or outside you. This gets to what we're just talking about. For if God is outside you, how are you going to get to this God who, not being some part of you, must be separated from you? How can you hope to unite things which are different from each other? But the God who is already within you, being forever perfect and complete, needs no reunion with anyone, and you need no reunion with this God. Now, you probably couldn't read that to your born-again Christian friends and have it resonate with them. But if for somebody on the path of recognizing that there is the God within, this statement is to recognize that there's a difference there, and a big difference in how you approach God. If God is outside you, then you're always beseeching the external God to intervene into your life. Whereas when the God is within you, there is no external beseeching. What you end up doing is recognizing you're drawing on a power and presence that's always already within you. And that's what the bulk of this article really is about, is a reminder for us to tap into that essence within us. He says, ever since the principle of evolution has produced self-conscious thought, you have, by your use of the law of liberty, created bondage. Not that bondage really existed, but the possibility of using freedom in a limited way instead. Let me read that again and break it down for you. He says, ever since the principle of evolution has produced self-conscious thought. Okay, the process of us moving through evolution has allowed the physical forms of humans to cross a threshold where we can think and think about our thinking. That's what he's talking about there. Lower forms, plants, lower animals, etc., they have consciousness within them, but they have not crossed that threshold where they can think about their thinking per se. So we have the ability to have self-conscious thought. And then he goes on to say, you have, by your use of the law of liberty, created bondage. What is the law of liberty? The law of liberty is simply that you, by the very nature that you can think about your thinking and you have a choice about what you're thinking, you've used your thoughts to create bondage in your life. You've created the negative experiences, and those things that seem like limitations in your life are created by the thoughts that you've chosen. So you've got a freedom to choose. Do you want to choose a greater and higher life of freedom and prosperity and abundance and love and all the things grand and glorious that can fill this material experience? Or do you want to fill it with things that are less than what you want? And so what he's talking about here is that we've used this law of liberty, the power of choice, to create bondage, to create the negative. He says, not that bondage really existed, but the possibility of using freedom in a limited way existed. What he's saying there, and says it in other quotes in this document, is that God, the divine, gave us free will choice to choose our thoughts. It allowed us to evolve to the point where we could think about our thoughts and then choose our thoughts. And that's where we are as humans. We can choose what we want to, how we choose to think about things. Think about what I was talking about a moment ago in responding to Roy's question about we can choose how we approach somebody who believes different spiritual beliefs from us. Do we choose to argue with them and try to make them see our point of view and to make them us be right and them be wrong? Or do we want to say, here's what I believe and I honor what you believe because I know it works for you? And we don't have to agree on that. And still we can love each other. And that's choice too. We can choose every encounter to bring more love to the circumstances or to bring a divisiveness to it. The divisiveness is not what we normally want. And when we want that, when we choose that, we're choosing bondage. But when we are choosing to honor our differences, then we're choosing love and we're choosing a sense of connectedness with other people. Okay. Um, well, thank you, Roy. I appreciate the lunch invitation. And I know you are going to do just wonderful and perfect in the conversation. This is a good question too, because many of us are getting together with relatives this upcoming week over Thanksgiving, and if you have relatives who believe differently from you, and I know the big thing that's been in the news lately is the difference on political beliefs, and so no matter what the topic is that seems to divide us, we can use the power of freedom that Holmes is talking about to unite us rather than divide us. And so I encourage us all to look into ways that we can unite us. Let me jump through just a few other quotes in this particular section because I do want to get to the second half of these articles. Okay, and keeping in mind that this whole thing about the God within you, that he goes through the life within you, the mind that's within you. When he talks about the mind that is within you, he says, it's perhaps difficult for you to realize that the very mind which you use is the mind of God. But if this mind within you is the mind of God, then the law of this mind must be the law of God. Hence, not only the mind of God, but also the law of God is within you at this very moment. What he's saying here, and he says it in many quotes. Let me give you another one. This mind, which is God, permeates every atom of your being, is the governing principle in every organ of your body. If you can imagine that you are like this form that you are in both in the world of form, but both you beyond this form in the world of the non-material, you're swimming and moving in an ocean of God energy, that God is permeating every essence of you on all realms, physical realm, mental realm, spiritual realm. You're all embodied with and imbued with this power of the divine. And science of mind, that's what mind stands for. Mind with a capital M that Ernest is talking about is the mind that is within us. And that mind has that conscious aspect awareness. Do you think about that when you're using your thoughts and your thinking, that you're using the one mind? I'm using the one mind. You're listening and you're interpreting what I'm saying and you're putting your own spin and thoughts on it. You're using the same mind I'm using. That's like, wow. It looks like, to us in the world of form, we're transmitting over the internet and we're having these videos and I'm separate and blah, blah, blah. But we're using the one mind. In fact, Ernest says that the way that you're able to express yourself and me to understand you and for you to understand me is because we are using one same mind. We're using God's mind, but we're using it individualized in our own awareness with our own experiences and our own patterns and beliefs. But the use of what we're using is that one mind of God. Okay, and it's just individualized within us. Now, you reference this in here, the law, and you can see there the law that is within you. And he's really talking about the power, the divine power that law has within you. I like this quote. I want to share this one. He says, the principle is perfect, complete, and limitless, but your thought circumscribes its very action and causes the very mind of freedom to create conditions which you call bondage. This point I was getting at a moment ago. The principle of God is perfect. God wants perfection for your life. God wants you to have love, harmony, peace, abundance, prosperity. All the things of goodness in life are there for you. The principle is perfect, complete, and limitless, but your thought circumscribes its action and causes the very mind of freedom that could outline all of this abundance and prosperity and love for us. It circumscribes it to create conditions which you call bondage. So then the idea is that's what you're feeling, you currently could call bondage, the any sense of lack of friends, lack of money, lack of love, lack of a job, lack of the ability to express your creative abilities, whatever it is, that bondage. And it's not to blame. I want to be very clear here. This is not a saying, oh, what's in your thinking kind of thing. This is a recognition to say, okay, if this power really is in me, then what thoughts do I need to clean up? Not from a shame and blame kind of thing, but simply a reorientation of your thinking. Where do you need to shift your thinking so that you can see and use this freedom and power within you and this law that is within you? This law. He says the law that is within you is an activity of the mind principle in you. So not only is mind your conscious thoughts, but mind is also the subconscious that is continuously keeping your body flowing. It's the memories that you have. It's the consciousness of the collective consciousness is part of the mind. And also the principle that acts upon our thoughts is part of the mind. He just uses the word law to delineate the power aspect of it. He goes on to even stress that more in the fourth section of the article, where he talks about the power that is within you. The power that is within you. He says the power that is within you is the power of your word. The power within you is not so much a will as it is a willingness. That is, you never have to will things to happen. You merely have to know that they are happening. Oftentimes when we hear that, oh, change your thinking, change your life, or the power of your thoughts, we think all I got to do is do some forceful thinking. I'm going to sit here and think hard, and that's going to make what happen? Well, you don't have to will anything. What you have to do is set into a motion this effortless ease, this willingness of life to just flow for you in the greatest abundance. We have to get your smallness out of the way and allow that flow, that divine flow of goodness just to be there. And so you have to get into the state of just knowing that they're happening, knowing that they're happening. And that's part of the power. Part of the power is to get our judgments of life, our senses of negativity, our senses of lack and limitation out of the way, and allow life to flow. He says, you are not to think of the power within you as though it were God, for the law of mind within you is merely a mechanical force which the activity of your thought uses for definite purposes. Hence, it's no more God than electricity is God. What he wants you to see is you've got a force and power within you, and just to use it. He used to start his radio shows going, there's a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. Every program began that way back in the 1950s. And that's true. There is a power for good in the universe. And that good is what you want to stress. You have a power for good within you, and you can use it. But get out of the way with your limited thinking. Again, I'm encouraging comments and dialogue. For those of you who are listening to it live, be sure to drop a comment. If you're listening live and you haven't already said so, please drop your name and where you're from, at least in the chat, so I'll know you're there. And I appreciate all the viewers who are watching this live, and of course those who watch it later on the recordings. Power that is within you. He also references the friend that is within you. I like this because we don't often talk about this a lot. He's talking about the idea that this power and presence, when we move from the old external sky God in our thinking to a sense of God being a flow and presence and power and infinite intelligence and a love, and that sometimes it's easy for us to let go of the personalness of our sense of the divine. We often hear people who have, religious and spiritual experiences of an external God. And one of the interesting things I like to point out is that when we experience God from the level of our understanding. If our belief is that God is an external being, then again, a power of our thinking is going to create with us experiences that reinforce that any experiences of God as an external being. If our thinking is that there is no God and that everything is mechanical force and law and science, the power of our thinking is going to create and reinforce for us a world where matter is the truth. And because the power of thinking is working in both instances, our thoughts that say that God is an external being is going to give us evidence of that. And if our thoughts that say that life is only matter is going to give us evidence of that. And so, we're also thinking that, God is an infinite being in presence that is within us, and it's going to give us evidence of that as well. And one of those pieces of evidence is that we're having this experience of a connection with something. And hello, Linda from Woodland Park. We're glad you're with us today. And again, if you've got a question or a comment, feel free to drop it in. We hope you're benefiting from today's discussion of Ernest Holmes' The God Within You, the 12-part series from the Science of Mind, currently available in the Science of Mind archives in one complete document. In this, though, Ernest wants to build this sense that within us, this divine, this God that is within us, is a friend. There's a personal aspect to it. There's a support to it. There is this divine essence in us. It's not just a power and a presence and blah, blah, blah. It also has a personal to us that desires to connect with us. Here's how he phrases some of this. He says, do you know that you have a friend within you who is closer than your shadow? This friend anticipates your every desire, knows your every need, and governs your every act. But remember, this friend is not separate from you. He is you. He is the God within you, the divine presence, personalized through you. Personalized. This God is personalized through you. Hence, again, the aspect and how God shows up in your life is personalized for you. And there's this. Emerson tells us that each should watch the spark of genius that flashes across his own consciousness. And when you watch the spark of genius that flashes across your own consciousness, you're communicating with this indwelling presence. When you sit in meditation and have a divine thought, when you're writing, when you're doing some automatic writing and you put a question down on paper and just let your mind get out of the way and words come from, and you don't even know where they're coming from, you're communicating with that friend within you. We often call it the higher self. Many of us like to say, oh, my higher self told me blah, blah, blah. Your higher self is actually this friend. It says, hence the friend within you has no inherited tendencies of evil, lack, or limitation. This invisible friend is your inner absolute and perfect self, individual as you in you. This means that God in you is you, and that your real individuality is a direct incarnation of the pure, perfect, and living spirit. So how you're showing up and how that friend in you is showing up is your trueness, your godness, that true aspect within you. The friend within you is united with all other spirits in the one great spirit. I like that. There is always some part of you which reaches out and penetrates the nature of others, thus irresistibly drawing them to you and drawing you to them. You ever feel that connection with others or they feel that connection with you? That is the spirit within them and the spirit within you that is touching and connecting with each other and recognizing that God energy in each other. And that sense is that friend within you. Ernest goes on to talk about the healing presence within you too. He says that since God, or the original life principle, is already within you, then it follows there's a healing presence in you. Any physician will tell you, and I like this, any physician will tell you that he merely assists nature, but that nature really is the healing agent. In other words, he holds the mechanical, he holds the physical in a certain position until the spiritual can rejuvenate it. He may mechanically unlock some of its congested parts until the natural law of circulation and elimination is restored. I love that. I love that. Because what we're looking at is it's real easy to say, oh, give me this pill, do the surgery, da, 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 da. The actions of Western medicine and the physicians are wise and valued, and they serve an important purpose for us. But we also, and he's pointing out here, that what the physician is tapping into is making movements and adjustments that allow our physical form to bring forth the proper healing. Sometimes it could be that the ingestion of certain substances are going to bring about that healing more naturally. Sometimes the surgeries or other actions of the doctor are going to bring that. But always it's not simply the surgery and it's not simply the drug. It's invoking and using those as tools to invoke the natural healing power that is already within this body. And both serve an important purpose, but it's ultimately our physical forms and the God energy within us and that divine flow that if God created this body, Ernest says, God knows how to fix this body. Okay. Since the only final creative agency in the universe must be mind, and since we are mind, and since that which you are is God in you, then it follows that this healing presence performs its beneficent act through your consciousness. So God is healing through your consciousness. Then he gets to the peace that is within you. He says the message Jesus delivered was that that we are about peace. And it was this message to reveal the nature of God to humanity, to demonstrate not only that God is peace, but that this peace which God is belongs to man and is some part of his spiritual nature. He goes on to say, the peace that is within you then is not something separate from God. This peace is something that expands from within. Always this peace has been in you. Just think about that. We are always talking about we all want world peace, but the peace starts within us. We are embedded and flowing in God energy, and God within us is peace. Now, what does that mean for us if we really anchor that into our awareness? It means that the peace that I want to see displayed in the external world is a peace that I already have inside here. And if I can tap into the peace through this healing presence, the friend, the power, the law, the mind, the life that's within me, if I can touch into this peace, I can bring this peace more into my own life. He says, peace is within you now. God has implanted this peace within you. The peace is within you that is birthless, deathless, and changeless. He says, act as though peace already possessed your soul and it will possess it. Act as though peace already emanated from your spirit and it will emanate from it. Speak peace into the confusion and your peace will heal the confusion. Can we come forth with a heart of peace in all our actions? So Roy, as you talk with your relatives, can you anchor into the peace within you and bring that peace within you? The more we can bring to any challenging situation in our lives, anchor into peace as we go into it and remain peaceful through it, that the peace that we are is going to, we have a sphere of influence around us. As I quoted him earlier, he said that, that there is something within us that connects with others as we meet with them, that the peace that's within us flows out from us. And others who get into our sphere of influence, our aura, if you would like to use that word, they feel that peace. We've all been around peaceful people who we want to be around because they exude this peace. That peace is in you. And you can tap into it, according to Ernest. As we're heading into the final minutes, one of the things I wanted to get into is the last section of this article. And I guess I've just got off on tangents and talking, but I do want to stress a few things. Here is where, when we get into parts 8 and 12, Ernest Holmes makes a shift. First 7 parts, he's given us basic science of mind concepts, basic thoughts about this what's within us. And in the last parts, the last 5 parts, he shifts voice in the article. And again, I wrote about this on consciousbridge.com in my blog. And it's an interesting thing. If anybody's ever read like Neil Donald Walsh in his Conversation with God's book, think about the fact that he would be Neil as the human, talking from a human perspective, and then the higher self of Neil speaking as God. And you could hear the different voices as the humanness challenged and questioned. And then the spiritual aspect of Neil spoke with a loving, divine caringness. I've seen this in other people too who've used this shift in voice. Ernest shifts in the final 5 sections of this article to write from the sense of the I am. Let me give you just a taste of this as we move into the final minutes of this presentation. He says in the first section about I am the master of your destiny, I am within you is the master of your destiny because I create all destinies. But the real master whom you seek and the teacher for whom you look is I am. the eternal presence of your own soul. And you'll notice every one of these sections, these parts of this article starts with the word I am. What he's flipping into is using the great I am. And we've all heard this. If you've been on the spiritual path, you know that the phrase I am simply references the divinity within you. Another way of saying it, it's the Christ consciousness within you. It is the God within you, is the great I am. This I am is the friend that is within us. It is the sustainer of us. It is that aspect of us. So from this last final sections, Ernest writes with the voice of this I amness that's embodied in you and I. He writes from that voice to remind us that we continuously have the abundance of life, that there is a creative force within us, that our lives are continuously sustained, and that this Christ nature of the divine is within us. Christ is within us. Yes, he says, I am your teacher, your friend. Within you, because I am within you, is the only presence there is. The I am within you is the only presence there is. Your true self constitutes the only mediator between the visible and the invisible. Think about that. There is an aspect of the I am that helps connect you to this visible world, to the invisible world. Be still then and know that I am in the midst of you is your master, your teacher, your friend. You are one with me, and my being in you is your personality. It is also your body, your mind, your spirit. Every cell of your body, every thought of your mind, every glory of your spirit. Hence, that which you have so ardently sought has never been separated from you for one moment. My desire within you is to be expressed, has been the motivating power, impelling and compelling you evermore to reach out on and up. That power that is within you that pushes you on the spiritual path, that pushes you on to grow and evolve to the highest expression of who you are, is the great I am, the God, Christ consciousness within you, the friend, the sustainer, the creative force. This article, this 12-part article, again, you can go out on the Science of Mind website, and if you go to the Science of Mind archives, sciencemindarchives.com. It's currently on their homepage, but if it's not there, just search for the God within you, or there's the complete URL on your screen, and it gives you including the entire 12 period articles. I also want to remind you that you can go to my website and read my blog, where I speak more about the change in voice and give you a lot more quotes from this final section, where Holmes writes with a mystical voice that is truly deep and one of the most reflective and mystical aspects of his writings that I have seen in years. And I think you would benefit from reading it. There's a link also on my website in the blog to the article itself. I encourage you to pick this up and also to explore and know the God within you. I want to thank everybody who's been with us today for being on the program. And listening to the program and dropping your comments in. I also wish to, invite you to share this with other people. If you got anything out of it, you can also go out and watch the video again, share it with others, and hopefully they will benefit from it as well. It is such a great opportunity to be with you this morning, and also call you to remember that the New Thought Media appreciates all of your support, and there's a way in which you can also support financially to keep these programs coming, and also to continue to dispel this wonderful and distribute this wonderful truth out into the world. So thank you so much, and until next time, take care.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.